So I'm going to try to make a quick response to this video. This will be the third time I've tried to record this over the last week, so hopefully YouTube will like this one. I'm just basically going to go over the comments that I put in response to your video and try to explain them a little bit better. So the first one, no, there's not separate yous right behind you who have experienced the same thing, especially not who have experienced the same thing that you're experiencing. But the idea is that there might be the same you behind you who is experiencing the same or different things than you're experiencing. Everything all exists at the same time, and so it's still the same you that's being changed. It's just that if something in your past changes, there's no reason to believe that that would instantaneously change your future. It would probably take as much time to play out as it does for you to play out your future. So it's your past that changes. Those separate yous are still you. You're still experiencing different events in a linear fashion than a past that you might be experiencing. Or a past you might be experiencing. I use the phrase past you and future you and stuff like that just out of simplicity for tracking purposes, because we haven't set up a tracking system yet, and this stuff is kind of like the foundation that we need to do before we can get to the details. But yeah, ultimately, like the tracking system is I'm not going to call them temporal objects anymore, because I'm sorry about that. That one is my fault. That was a bad name, and I apologize for it. I'm just going to call them instances of an object's existence, I guess. So it's the same object that's existing, but it can exist in separate instances. But what was I saying? Oh yeah, that's the tracking system is with these the instances, and that's how we're going to be able to track the past you and the future you. It's just going to be a different instance of the same you. Temporal objects are demarcated. Yeah, what defines an instance? It's demarcated by changes in movement, and so which it begins with an uncaused cause and ends with an unaffected effect. And so I think that they're the closest thing to reality that we can really get to by and still be using actual specific points that have nothing on one side of them and something on the other. And that's not to say like that matter is coming into existence. It's just a change in movement. Yeah, the matter would have always existed, and then there would have been some single movement which caused it all to explode outwards. So yeah, that's the beginning and end of an instance is, there doesn't necessarily have to be, there's the end is right now, basically. The beginning is whatever caused the change, and the end is the present, and it continues moving forward. You exist at every point in time, and by which I just mean at all times you exist. And it's the same mass throughout, but it moves differently. Which is why when we talk about instances, I don't include the physical objects themselves in that. I only include the movement. And so the movement contains a point in space where it moves, but that point in space isn't an actual point in space. It's just a relative point in space. So like it'll always start at 1 as far as it's concerned, but it'll contain a relation to the previous instance that led to it, and then what changed, and then head out from there. Changes in these movements can result in changes in the properties of groups of mass which form physical objects, but it's still the same mass. It's what it comes down to is like it all, when you break everything down to its smallest part, the way that we group objects is arbitrary compared to what reality is, and so the only way that I think that we can actually get a fairly set measurement is to create things that are separate from reality, but which can define reality or describe reality. Instances or temporal parts. Sorry, not instances. Temporal parts are a way to describe how an object exists over time. Yeah, so it's not a series of points in time. It's the opposite of that. Temporal parts are a way of indexing time, a way of tracking time, and so it looks at the difference of an object between 2 points, and those points are arbitrarily assigned, and it captures the movement between them, because we can't see anything within a point, but we can see things between points. And by looking at the way things change, then we can account for why I'm wearing a hat and I'm not wearing a hat aren't the same sentence, even though I was wearing a hat yesterday. Because there's a change in states there, and so temporal parts are a way of just keeping track of those. And yeah, they're descriptions only because the points are drawn arbitrarily, unfortunately. So, which is why, when we say instances have they're separate, they're specific points, and instances contain the movements that are described by the temporal parts within it. So an instance of an object which doesn't contain the definition of the object itself, but is applied to that object, it's the only thing about that object that we can look at where the points aren't drawn arbitrarily. And physical objects exist from the beginning of time to the end, regardless of when our currently perceived present is located. What state they exist in, I believe, is constantly changing, not just in the way that they move through time, but in what happens at specific points in time itself, like what the way that time works. The movements that happened that led us up to this point might be different for the same mass if we went back in time and viewed it again, it might end up differently, and I think it would actually necessarily end up differently. I believe that in order to have time travel, I don't think it's possible to have a one-dimensional timeline if you want to account for time travel, and time travel certainly seems physically possible, and so we have to start thinking about coming up with a way to make it work. But that's a whole nother series, so hopefully I managed to explain a bit more. If you got more questions, please ask more. I need more motivation. It's I've had a hard time keeping up to date with both my schoolwork and trying to get this theory grounded, but hopefully I'll have some more time to post a few more videos over the next few days. So yeah, get back to me.